fellas, what's going on? It's Preacher, and after recently being described by our game director as people who obsessively sim, and, you know, they can't get away from that. People are obsessively simming. It felt like a knock. It felt like a sleight of hand, because BFA is the most complicated looting system that we have ever had in the game that leaves no hope whatsoever for anybody just getting into the game. It has never, ever been as bad as this. And right now, without third-party add-ons, websites and stuff, you can't possibly know what's good for your character in terms of gearing. Specifically the Azerite armor. Let's not forget this. Do you know that the average spec, not class, the average spec has something like 40 different Azerite traits? Just from the first two rings. Just from the first two rings, you have about 40 variations of traits. Why? Why is there so many? Why is there so many? And when people ask, like, can we get some in-game clarity as to how good they are? Because there's...
1 second. The volume is turned all the way up at max with every single setting. It's turned all the way up on my mixer. It's turned all the way up on my computer. It's turned all the way up on the video. The volume is not going any higher than this. Okay? So just shut the fuck up.
Many of you have noticed, the vast majority of them are simply reworded variations of the exact same thing. Something that has a chance to do damage. Something that has a chance to increase a stat. They're all...
That's actually true.
Not all. I take it back. Most of these traits are just simply... something might happen that you have no control
he's doing
over
Mythic
whatsoever.
Fetid.
And therefore you have to ask the question, is like,
okay,
well, which one does more? Can we get some idea of which one does one? If you're going to give me 5 variations of a chance to do damage, I need to know, 1, how much damage it does, and how often it's going to do it. And that way, even with the ludicrous idea of having so many variants of the same thing, I can maybe make an educated guess in-game as to which one is better for me. Which one is the one I want to take? Now, I would point out here how broken and uneven the Azerite traits are, with some seemingly, despite being extraordinarily similar in nature, massively outdoing the other ones. But Blizzard saw fit and recently confirmed that they're not really going to remove traits, as in dwindle the number from 40 down to, say, I don't know, 6, which seems way more realistic to me. Instead, they're going to take some away, put some more back in to replace those that maybe have a little bit more interaction, because as we know,
that would be good.
Most of them are
that would absolutely be good.
Very passive. If they were literally blank, you would not know they exist. As simple as that. You wouldn't know they exist. Without having, again, a third-party add-on like a damage meter with a damage breakdown, it would be practically impossible to tell whether some of them were even functioning or not. Regardless of how good they might be, you simply wouldn't know. And also, a lot of them are random buffs that, again, you can do nothing with. In fact, we did a calculation. Can you believe this? We are only a few weeks into BFA, yet my character carries more random buffs and stat changes from gear than it did at the very last day of Legion, which had all the extras of the expansion.
I think that's actually true.
On top of it. That's right. Think about that for a moment. We're a few weeks into BFA, and right now my character has 3 more random stats gains, power gains, changes, and things like that that are totally out of my control than my fully mythic Antaurus killed everything Titan slaying mage had at the very end of Legion, including every patch cycle throughout that expansion that included things like the Nether Crucible.
So he's like saying how many random buffs he gets.
All these extra things we got later in the expansion.
Okay.
Right now, just a few weeks in, my character has more of them, which is insane. I literally can't do anything with this stuff. My character is doing all kinds of crazy things that I don't notice.
It's like completely out of his control.
Now, the problem here is they're going to be adding more. On top of this,
boy.
We're already about 40 per character for spec, and now they're going to be adding more in over the course of the expansion. They confirm they're going to replace some of them with a little bit more interactivity. Okay, but can we just not chop these down so there's not so many? And also, they're then going to add more on top, likely in the form of an extra ring or something along those lines. As we know, the Siege of Zuldazar is coming, and of course our little mini raid.
Where's our legendaries?
Shara. Those are all coming down the line. Now, the problem is, this destroys a lot of the casual player base, and generally at the top end makes it just super infuriating. Along with the Azerite armor, and it's not purely the Azerite armor, we had the change of main stats becoming vastly more important than secondary stats, so that you can actually
that's for item level.
Item level gear you have, put that on and never have to think about it again. Now, from a grade school perspective, from the perspective of somebody who likes to look at Bill and his big red ball, that's quite a good thing. On the other side of this, it also helps the community, which have pushed themselves into a corner. I'm talking about the community of the lone guys, or the guys who can't raid, who can't do organized content, all those guys who have basically shoved themselves into a horrible situation where every single thing that matters that they might want to do is based entirely on an item level number. Now, I'm glad to say,
that's exciting.
I am glad to say that this is becoming less of an issue, because more and more people are turning to better solutions, such as Raider.io. Is it perfect? No, I'm not saying that, but it is absolutely better than item level, because it's becoming more apparent even to
it's
the less educated players of the game that item level is so random, because the entire loot system now, from start to finish, is a complete lottery. There's no way to target stuff you actually want.
Random as fuck.
That item levels are irrelevant. Some guy can do a Warfront and get an exceedingly ridiculous weapon. He can then go and do the 4 mythic zeros for a heroic cache from Uldir and get a ridiculous item. He can do something like get an Azerite piece, which gives him a massive advantage over people who are still stuck at 340 and have no access to the higher level stuff. They can
RNG
do PvP and randomly gain crazy power levels. And there are so many sources of gaining completely arbitrary random upgrades that it's a total lottery. It's a raffle from start to finish. You put your hand in a basket full of possible things, you pull one out, and it's either a piece of shit or it's ridiculously good. And more players are becoming so savvy to the idea that what gear your character has means nothing. It absolutely means nothing.
That sounds like a fun game.
Good mentality change, and maybe at the back end it's kind of intentional by Blizzard.
Thank you, Falky, for the one you resub.
But it doesn't help the fact that for people who are trying to, play an RPG and get their characters to the best they can be, we're screwed. We're utterly screwed.
Yes.
Over the last few days on stream, people have seen me doing what Blizzard said is obsessively simming, because frankly, even with my years of experience in this game, I don't know what gear is good for my character. I know what stats are good for him. I know what he should be aiming for. I know the targets I want to hit down to the percentage on certain things. But just looking at the gear in my bags, I can't work it out. I look at Azerite armor and I say, well, I know this first ring trait's really good, but its secondary trait is really bad. But I can look at the first ring trait, which isn't as good as the other piece of armor, but its secondary trait is really good. And therefore, it's like, what's best here? Because this should be a simple process. This was a process Blizzard was aiming for years. And of course, it's now memed, is that things like reforging were removed because Blizzard hated the fact at the time, and their mentality on this has obviously shifted, that people shouldn't need to, one, get a loot drop in a raid and then leave that raid in order to fix it and make it correct and to make it as best as it could possibly be.
More
you should
streamlining.
be able to get an item.
It's completely true.
Be able to just equip
it's completely
it
fucking
without having
true.
to go to a third-party website, without having to get extra add-ons, without having to use in-game code, things like that we are now.
That's too complicated
to do as the norm. And widespread, I've never had so many requests for people to show what variations of sims. How can we simulate this, and this? How can we double check? And on top of this, what's making it even worse is that on a pretty regular basis now, the Azerite traits, and I believe it happened today as of filming this video, are all being changed and shifted. Now, I will point out here that they're being changed and shifted to try and make them all the same. Now, this is insanity at this point. So what we're going to do is have 40-odd different traits that are, hopefully in Blizzard's eyes, the best solution they can come up with is to try and make them all do about the same thing. Why?
That sounds really fun.
What is the idea behind this? Why have so many variants, and as we said, of very, very similar traits? Yeah? Very similar traits that have a chance to do damage and have a chance to give some sort of stat gain. Why have so many variants of it if you're aiming that it doesn't matter in the first place?
So many chances.
What a ludicrous amount of laborious work this must be. Put yourself in Blizzard's shoes. We have to look at all these traits. So I'm talking about one spec, say an Arcane Mage or an Arms Warrior, and I'm trying to get all 40 of these traits to kind of be exactly the same, despite all doing very, very slightly different things. And this should mean that, yes, something will always be the best and something will always be the worst, but people shouldn't be upset at getting upgrades. And we also don't want to be in the position many people were at the beginning of BFA of getting upgrades of 30 item levels and it not being worthwhile. Instead, what we want is to be very, very similar, and then we ask ourselves a simple question.
It's ridiculous.
You are putting in a ludicrous amount of work mathematically, with code, with simulations, with all this stuff to try and reach a point where you're nullifying your own system. You're putting in excessive amounts of work to try and make your system pointless. It's utter madness at this point. So getting frustrated, coming back to the point of being frustrated that, frankly, at this point, I can look at a pair of boots that have terrible stats from me, and more noticeably, on a personal note, you notice the difference. For example, if my character desires haste, as many of you could probably relate to, my character just plays way too slow compared to Legion. I desperately want haste. However, I got this really good upgrade that has Verse Mastery on it. Verse, no one can tell the difference, right, with versatility. And Mastery, for some classes, can be noticeable, but in the majority of cases, not. It's usually some sort of passive power gain, similar to anything else. It's doing more damage, but can you tell when you're playing the game? No. Can you tell when you crit a lot more? Yes. Can you tell when your character plays much faster? Yes. But because it's a 10 item level upgrade over the ones that had the perfect stats on you, that had something like crit haste, for example, which are two noticeable stats, having to drop that all the way back down because it makes your strength go up or your intellect go up, which you can't notice, but in fact, it has a negative effect. My character now plays slowly. It now plays slower than it did before.
He's saying that mastery and versatility don't change the way that you play your character.
I got a negative impact from this.
That's true.
However, because of the system, this is actually doing more damage. Apparently. I can't really tell. On the damage meter, maybe it's reflected. But in fact, my character carries so much random power gains from Azerite armor that sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. And that's just the bare nature of it. But one thing I can say for sure is if this happens with a couple or 2 or 3 items, where I'm dropping down things like haste and crit, the noticeable effects of my character in this example, then I can feel something. And it's a negative something. Very, 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 very bad. On top of that is the sheer quantity of loot. At this point, it's become pretty absurd just how many sources and quantities of loot have been provided in the game, which has made, and I'm seeing this pretty regular, and you guys are probably not into this, making the whole gearing system of World of Warcraft right now really dissatisfying. For the reason, a lot of the reasons we've just talked about. I get a new piece
This is what we were getting to.
I don't know if it's good. I know what the best
This is it right here.
I've asked a streamer, or I've checked a website.
Ask the streamer.
And I've checked the Sims. You know, if you've gone to that level, you'll know which one's the best one, but you'll get a different one. It's not quite the same one, because there's lots and lots of variations of, say, Azerite heads, Azerite shoulders, and Azerite chests. Is this one better than the one I had? And that's a very dissatisfying experience. I got a pair of boots or shoulders, boots or legs or belt or gloves. They're really bad stats, but they're way higher item level, let's say out of your Mythic cache or your PvP cache. Ordinarily, for the last history of the game, I wouldn't want those because they're actually really bad stat-wise on the things that I care about. But then I can run a sim and say, no, actually they are an upgrade. But in a lot of cases, and I've certainly felt this myself, is my character now physically plays worse than it already did, even in this early gear, which is not a satisfying experience. And on top of that, you know in your heart of hearts, this item is essentially trash. It's trash, and you would replace it as soon as humanly possible for something similar with good items, with a good item level that also carried the stats you want. So you end up burdened or saddled with this stuff you don't particularly want, but with the way the system is now, especially for a lot of classes involving main stats, which isn't everybody, you're saddled with it anyway, and it's a dissatisfying experience. Why does it need to be so complicated? I feel at this point we should also talk about the idea of the hidden quest. Blizzard's reluctance to make systems which make things clear and obvious. If you don't know this, if you have any armor from Uldir, which you can get from far, normal, heroic, and
this is the re-origination array.
That your general traits, such as Laser Matrix or the Archive of the Titans, also carries just 5 little words at the bottom of it. 5 little words. Enables re-origination array within Uldir. And that's
what does that mean?
That's the only mention of this thing. And you'll notice when you go into Uldir is that you suddenly have an extra buff. If you can see it amongst the swathe and wash of all the other buffs that your character is currently carrying. And it's a boost to a secondary stat. It's actually a boost to your highest secondary stat, whichever one you are stacking the most of, whether you wanted to or not, by the way, coming back to the idea of just wearing the highest item level garbage you have, then it will give you a buff to that. How does that work? It took Blizzard 4 paragraphs to explain how Reorigination Array works. And again, it comes down to, one, unwillingness to communicate, maybe to just stop burdening the players with information. This 5 little words that they've attached to the Uldir armor required 4 paragraphs of explanation as to how it actually works. Now think about the insanity of this situation. We have this buff that we have added. It's kind of the basis of what Azerite armor should be. Wearing the armor from the raid gives you a special bonus while in that raid. Okay. That's a good idea.
That's good.
Azerite armor could have really got creative by playing around with the idea of it works really well in certain areas, and it also works really well in a raid environment with multiple players, at least a minimum of 10. We could have done some cool stuff there, but instead it comes down to this 5 little lines. Now, what are these 5 little lines and how do they work? Well, your character's actually on a secret quest. That's right, it's a big mystery. For some reason, Blizzard didn't want to make this known. And as you kill bosses week on week, this
why would they do that?
Giving you a more powerful secondary stat bonus every single week, all the way up till 10. So it will take 10 weeks in order for you to gain this buff. Now, don't worry, because this quest is active before you have the armor. That's right. So if you didn't get any Azerite armor, but you killed, I think it's 3 bosses in Uldir in the first week, don't worry, because the quest remembers. And when you get your Azerite armor, it will go, okay, well, you've already killed X amount of bosses. We're going to give you this extra secondary stats.
Well, that's cool.
And it all works like this in the background. Now, you might say, and for a lot of people, what's the problem? I actually want as much crit as I want. I want as much haste as I can get. I want as much mastery, and I want as much verse, and I've been careful about my gearing, and I've been wise, and I've been choosing, and that is my best secondary. Good for you. It's not the case for everybody, and I always ask people, please look at it through someone else's eyes. Might I suggest this? There are some classes who stack certain secondary stats to a specific point, and that's because it's been known, and is known for a while, that going past that point, that secondary stat, be it crit, haste, mastery, or verse, or whatever it might be, becomes practically useless. And so we gear our characters around that number. We say, okay, we want to reach X amount of stat. That means I have to stack that stat. So let's call it crit. I need X amount of crit. And then if I go above X, then the crit becomes really useless. I don't want any more. But before I reach X, crit is actually very valuable. So I'm going to aim for this number of crit. Okay, so I get that. Oh, damn, my Uldir Reorigination Array is now not as good. Okay, what do we do about this? Well, now we're
It's a balancing act.
Do I carry a secondary set of other gear? Because obviously I need to.
This is what people have to do.
Armor, in order to bring my crit down to account for the fact that when I'm in Uldir, I'm going to get this extra crit, and that's going to work. How about this? And this is all happening, by the way, as a reminder, in secret. It's all happening in secret behind the scenes. Some of you might not even know it's happening until the next time you're in Uldir. How about this, though? How about you gave us the choice? It's called Reorigination Array. Why didn't we get some sort of add-on from Magni or whoever the fuck onto our Heart of Azeroth? Some sort of device that's sensing this array within Uldir. And from within this little add-on, think of it a little bit like an, I don't know, like an RPG. Think of it like an RPG where this fundamental item is modified in some way with the major content of the game. So your Heart of Azeroth is resonating.
Artifact power.
Here we go. You ready for some RP? Your Heart of Azeroth is resonating within Uldir, providing you some strength. It's resonating from your Azerite armor. Of course, the Heart of Azeroth is intrinsically linked to the Azerite armor. This armor is resonating with the Reorigination Array of Uldir, providing you an extra bonus. Tune it, much like a radio. Tune it to what you want. Allow the player to select where they want it to go. I would like it to give me more haste, please. More crits, more mastery, more verse, whatever your poison is. But now we have something interesting going on, a little bit of character customization. Is it much and is it hard? No, it's not. Will it affect the vast majority of players? Not really. But for those it does affect, it's
very annoying,
complicated system right now that didn't need to be that way. It would have been far cooler to have something go on that allows us to pick and choose what we want. What if I respec and I have to use this old gear, but, you know, look at this scenario. Oh, God, I've got to respec. So I'm a mage, right? So some fights I want to be arcane, some I want to be frost. I have to respec, but I've only really got one set of gear, and that's for my frost set, They're kind of close, but I would prefer one of the other stats. Maybe I retune my Heart as Vazaroth to resonate better within the reorigination array. Doesn't that sound fantastic? Like a fantasy RPG? I think so.
Sounds great.
And I'm able to just swap it around and change
so that means it's never going to happen.
Old era environment to the settings I would prefer, to what I would actually want. Instead, we've concealed all that for the sake of player safety, player peace of mind.
Player safety.
I'm trying to word it in a way that isn't because most of our players are too fucking stupid, because that's the way it comes across when you're having to
there it is. There it is right there.
You're trying to summarize 4 paragraphs into 5 words. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to summarize this 4-paragraph system into 5 words in order to prevent player burden. It's too cumbersome for players to understand.
They can't figure out numbers.
Well, it's too cumbersome for players to understand these little extra bonuses we got in. We're best
Words
off
are
just
hard.
telling them there's something called reorigination array. And if they can be asked to read it, if they can be asked to Google it, then they'll come up with some information to explain to them what that is. Instead of putting that into something pretty cool in-game that I think would make sense. I think this is kind of, I'm harping on about this because I know it's not a big deal for many, but I think it kind of summarizes the mentality. It summarizes the mentality that we now must protect the precious young little players from things. And we need to, and Blizzard has gone out of their way to make the looting system so complicated. Not to mention the Azerite armor not dropping in Mythic Plus, but we had to change the chest system, so now it's not guaranteed in a chest. You have some sort of protection that maybe you'll get it in a chest. By then you might not even want it, so that's a dead chest. All this complication, needless layers upon layers of RNG, on top of RNG, on top of prevention and hamstringing of the players to... I think Blizzard thinks they're protecting people. I think they think they're maybe doing us a favor, but ultimately this the BFA loot system is completely unrewarding right now. It feels very, very
I would agree with that.
Dissatisfying, at least to me, and in my opinion. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Are you getting a little frustrated now with being pretty much incapable of looking at a trinket and knowing if it's any good in any way? I've got 3 pieces of armor. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, there's no way to even know.
Didn't know to go to hero damage or to blood mallet or to go to a stream and ask somebody and see what they're wearing and see what talents people have. Are you getting really frustrated with this? Because where's the moment of fuck yeah, that's awesome? Let me know. Thank you very much for listening. Bye bye.
Okay. So that was a video people wanted me to watch. Like, so here's pretty much where I'm at. Just a second. Let me move over here. You guys know that I completely agree with this in pretty much every single like capacity. I've always agreed with like what he says. I think it's a very good point. You know, let me actually turn him. Song. Just let me turn this down. Holy fuck. Okay. There we go. Yeah.